I have a story for you. There was a certain prisoner who was on a work detail program of clearing the weeds on the highway. He had been convicted of burglary charges and was imprisoned for 12 years. He had served 2 years when the wardens allowed him to work around the prison and the highway close by. So on this particular day, when he saw no one looking at him, he dropped his weed whacker and sprinted into the dense bush nearby. And after running for 5 minutes, he saw a shack and entered in. Meanwhile, no warden had seen the prisoner escape until hours later during the evening headcount. The state police and the bounty hunter were called to aid the search, and it bore no fruit, for the prisoner had simply vanished. The prisoner meanwhile had found a hidden tunnel that was a hiding place for soldiers during World War II. A tunnel that no one knew it had been covered by thick brush. The prisoner started going around places looking for a job. He was hired to do farming and other menial jobs. Months passed, but the man was always conscious of his surroundings, always looking back to make sure he was not being followed. He bought himself a car and even rented himself a house, and all the while he thought no one was looking for him. He was free, but he was wrong. You see, even though time had elapsed, there was a manhunt for him, and plainclothes police had been dispatched everywhere. And one day, one of them spotted the prisoner coming out of a grocery store. The detective followed him to his house and called for backup. The backup arrived and in the evening surrounded the house. At the command of the lead state police, they broke the door and stormed inside the house. The prisoner, who was wearing a t-shirt with the inscription, "Forever Free," was captured without incidents and was returned back to prison. This time more time was added to his sentence because of the escape. His freedom had only lasted 8 months. You see, the man was positionally free in that he enjoyed the freedom to eat what he wanted, wear the clothing of his choice, drive around, but he was still conditionally a prisoner, for he had escaped from prison, but had not been released from prison. He had escaped but was living in fear of being captured. I call this prison with no walls. Many of us live like that. Example is toxic relationships. A woman is living in an expensive house, drives a car of her choice, travels around the world, but inside the mansion she's constantly verbally abused by her husband, who constantly monitors every move she makes. She's treated like an animal when she's inside her house, but outside, her servants treat her like a queen. She always has to escape her husband. An example of prison without walls. A certain man bought himself an expensive car on a loan. A car that took half of the paycheck every month. Why? His ego. He wants people to see he's not a cheap person. So the man had to do 16-hour shifts daily to make ends meet and keep the shiny car in the garage. This man, though free in that he wasn't a criminal, was imprisoned in his mind to things and to himself. A certain 70-year-old Jewish woman, a Holocaust survivor, was in a meeting narrating about a harrowing event, where she witnessed her parents being burned alive in a gas chamber in Germany. She was 7 years old, and as the parents were screaming at the ferocious leaping flames, the tall guard grinned at her and loudly shouted, "Death to the dogs," a phrase the German Nazi used on Jewish prisoners. She eventually was smuggled out of the camp and was taken to Austria before finally immigrating to the United States. She narrated on the power of the mind, in that we can become prisoners of ourselves, if we don't let go of people who have wronged us. And it was at that juncture, a certain frail-looking gentleman rose up and slowly limped to the front. And when he came in front the speaker, he looked at her and asked her, "Do you remember me?" The woman was perplexed and bewildered as she scanned the frowned, freckled face. Then she remembered. The woman fell down and started sobbing. Vivid images flooded her mind of the concentration camp, the torture of her people, the gas chamber, the screams of her parents, and the image of the guard froze her in her thought. And the man who was standing over her, was he the man in question? "Are you okay, ma'am?" the man interrupting her thoughts. The lady stood up and, quivering in her voice, asked him, "Are you the man that burned my parents?" "Forgiveness is what will set your mind free," said a visiting priest as he held the hand of the Jewish woman, who had calmed down, but was in disbelief. The man who murdered her parents was standing in front of her. "Hate and bitterness will keep you in prison," the priest continued. Meanwhile, the frail man stretched forth his hand to shake her hand. "I'm so sorry," the man muttered as tears rolled down his face. The woman mustered courage and hugged him. "I forgive you," her voice quivering in between sobs. There are things that can imprison us. Worldly things, toxic relationships, painful past experiences, guilt and shame, injustice, etc. Jesus said, "He whom the Son sets you free." You're not just positionally free. but are conditionally free also. There's no physical court that can set your mind free, but the Son of Man can. Your part is to receive his forgiveness as you also forgive others. Remember, people and things can make you escape pains of trouble, but the freedom is short-lived. Only the Son of Man can release you from captivity, and his freedom is permanent.